While he was still speaking, suddenly a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus said to him, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you are betraying the Son of Man?" When those who were around him saw what was coming, they asked, "Lord, should we strike with the sword?" Then one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple police, and the elders who had come for him, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as if I were a bandit? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. But Peter was following at a distance. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him in the firelight, stared at him and said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." A little later, someone else, on seeing him, said, "You are also one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." Then, about an hour later, still another kept insisting, "Surely this man also was with him, for he is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." At that moment, while he was still speaking, the cock crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the cock crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly.
I saw that man with Jesus. I know it was him. This has been a very scary, confusing day, and I am just a child and no more than a slave at that, but my eyes do not deceive me. I am not the cleverest girl in Jerusalem, nor the quickest slave, but I know I saw that man with Jesus. I may permit my feet and back to grow weary, but I do not allow my eyes or ears a moment's rest. A slave girl must keep her eyes and ears alert and her mouth shut. A slave girl must know when she is needed and when it is best to be out of the master's way. These things I know. These things I do. I watch, I listen, and most of the time I am quiet as the desert. When my master speaks in the company of the household I serve, I am so quiet he does not know I am listening. Lately, he has much to say about Jesus. He despises the man. "Who is it," my master asks, "that stirs up the Jews and claims that those who seek greatness must be slaves to one another?" My master says this is nonsense, worthless drivel, and he says this man is dangerous. I am just a foolish girl, but how can someone who speaks nonsense be dangerous? I am confused about everything that has happened. When this man from Galilee came to Jerusalem just a few days ago, he was welcomed as the new King David. The crowds cheered him on. They threw their cloaks on the ground with palm branches. They cried out to him, "Hosanna, save us." I wasn't there, but all Jerusalem has been busy with this news. The Romans had their big parade that same day, and I had to be there. I had to carry water and fruit for my master. He always attends the Roman parades. He says it shows the Jews who is really in charge of Jerusalem. When my master heard that Jesus had a parade on the very same day, he said, "He thinks to mock us, but he is no more than a dung beetle. He has no armies as we do. He has no weapons as we do. He has no power as we do." When he heard that this Jesus came riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, he said, "The man is a fool and an embarrassment to his people." My master must be right, but this man, Jesus, who has no power and proves his powerless by means of a humble donkey and wants to be great by becoming a slave, has all Jerusalem in a knot. The Romans see him as a pest who has his people dreaming of freedom from Roman rule. From what I see, that will never happen. The Roman Empire will reign forever. That is what my master says. The leaders of the Jews may think of him as a pest, but they call Jesus a criminal, a lawbreaker. They now cry for him to be crucified, and I think that may happen, for they are angry like a swarm of bees. There is great fury in the house of Caiaphas, who just a few minutes ago tore the garments from his back and threw them on the ground, screaming, "He is a blasphemer." From here in the courtyard, we cannot know everything that is going on inside, but we could all hear that. I don't know what a blasphemer is. It sounds terrible. My master is in there in the house of Caiaphas with the angry bees, but he is not one of them. My master works for Pontius Pilate, the governor, and he is here to keep an eye on Caiaphas, the high priest of the Jews here in Jerusalem. He told Caiaphas that he is here to help, but I know he is here to keep an eye on him. Nobody trusts this Caiaphas, and now that I have heard his wild screaming, I can understand why. I would not want to be his slave. The house of Caiaphas is filled with such angry men, while their servants, including me, wait outside here in the courtyard. It is a nice house, such as a Roman magistrate might own. I did not know a Jew could have such a fine house, but Caiaphas does. I'm glad to be out here in the courtyard. The high priest of the Jews frightens me. It is mostly servants waiting out here, but there are a few others who follow the crowd into this courtyard. A man, the others say his name is Peter, was sitting by himself. He does not wear the clothes of a servant, but wears instead the clothes of a laborer. He is not from Jerusalem. Even a silly slave girl can see that. I think he is one of those friends of Jesus who came with him from Galilee to Jerusalem. He was careful to sit with his head down at the end of the courtyard, nearest to where they have taken Jesus. A slave girl does not speak, unless spoken to anyone but another slave, but I was so curious, and I have heard that these Jesus people are kind. I have questions. I want to know how a slave may be great while yet being a slave. I want to know how this man, Jesus, who is a famous healer and teacher, has made so many enemies. And so I thought myself very brave to say this to this man. You were with Jesus, and I thought that such a man, daring enough himself to come into the courtyard of Caiaphas, might stoop to talk to a silly slave girl, but he would not. He said, in a voice big enough for the others to hear, "I do not know what you are talking about." And so I stepped away. It is true that I do not know what I am talking about most of the time, but I know this one was with Jesus, and I could see the fear in him. Believe me, I understand. I have lived only 10 years, more or less, but I have seen how cruel these men of power may be. And we can all hear what they are doing to the men of Galilee now. They are spitting in his face and hitting him and slapping him. I am glad not to be in there. After I suffered to speak to the disciple called Peter, and he denied knowing Jesus, he left the courtyard quietly, but he did not go far. He went only so far as the porch of the house of Caiaphas. I followed him, as did some of the others. Another slave girl, perhaps a little older than I, and having heard what I said and having witnessed his response, pointed to Peter, and in front of the crowd waiting there on the porch, she said, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Perhaps she meant to defend me, although she did not know me, Perhaps she thought to stand up for another slave girl, as an older sister might. Or it could be that she meant to frighten this Peter away or even do him harm. But again, and this time with a solemn oath, the man denied knowing Jesus. It was so obvious that this man, Peter, was not from Jerusalem and did not belong among us, and after a while some others approached him and said, "Surely you are one of those who came with Jesus from Galilee. We can hear it in your voice." And Peter, disciple of Jesus, who had been so quiet, who had kept his head down, began to curse and swear, "I do not know the man. I do not know the man." And he went away weeping, and I heard a rooster crowing nearby, and I felt sorry for him. I did not mean to drive him away. I should have kept my mouth shut, as is my way. I only wanted to learn more. Even a foolish slave girl can be taught, and I would like to know more about this man, Jesus, who teaches that the dignified shall be humbled, and the humble, even a modest slave girl, shall be dignified. I would like to know more about the one who declares that the poor are blessed and the meek will inherit the earth. Even a slave girl knows how to dream. Right now, however, the poor are getting spit in the face, and the meek are being slapped, and the humble are surrounded by men who show no mercy. I do not know what will happen to Jesus, but I think those hateful men in there will probably have their way. And I do not know what will happen to this man called Peter. He was braver than the others who came with Jesus, for he was the only one who came here. He was brave enough to come into the courtyard of Caiaphas. He was brave enough to get as close to his friend Jesus as he could, but he was not brave enough to talk to a lowly slave girl. He was bold, this Peter, but if he survives, I do not think he will amount to much. He is gone now. He crept away weeping, which is, I guess, what he had to do to save his life. And I will do what I must do. Keep my eyes and ears alert and my mouth shut more tightly, and know when I am needed and when it is best to keep out of the way, and watch and listen and be as quiet as the desert.